So this is a workshop on application to Gates-Cambridge scholarships. And let me give you a quick outline of how the session is going to go. I'll briefly tell you a couple of lines on what Project EduAccess is, if you don't know already. I'll introduce your panelists and then really hand it over to them. They'll take you through generally what the scholarship entails, what are the eligibility criteria, how the selection is made, what timelines you should think of, other details on application. They'll also share some very valuable tips from their own experiences. And of course, you will always have time for Q&A. Right, so Project EduAccess believes that access to higher education, leadership, and professional opportunities has been for the longest time restricted to people who've had certain privilege. And most people from marginalized communities have always been systematically denied through cost, information, and dispositional barriers. And it is our modest attempt to improve inclusivity in these spaces and remove some of these barriers and challenges that people from different backgrounds might face while applying. And we aim to improve the participation and representation of individuals from various marginalized backgrounds within higher education. And we do this by adopting 4 key interventions, these being mentoring, counseling, and role modeling, sharing information, advice, and guidance through public sessions as well as mentee-only sessions, capacity building and leadership skill development, and also evidence-based advocacy. I'll now quickly introduce your panelists. We have 3 Gates scholars with us today. We have Nikita, who is pursuing a PhD in education and joined Cambridge or joined the scholarship from 2021. Then we have Ankit, who's pursuing a PhD in history, and Feryal, who's pursuing a PhD in English literature. And they are both brand new Gates scholars who have just joined us this year. So welcome to all the panelists and thank you for your time. I am going to hand over to Ankit first.
Thank you, Anvisha. Okay, so about the Gates Scholarship. So there are different kinds of fundings available to support your postgraduate education, which includes university-wide funding, also departmental funding. There are fundings for external agencies as well. So there is funding by ESRC, AHRC, and all these external agencies. Gates is a funding which is a university wide funding. So it covers your full cost of study, which involves postgraduate study at University of Cambridge. Every year, we would usually see 80 full scholarships, like full cost scholarships being awarded. But increasingly, it is becoming competitive. This cohort has 75 scholars, if I'm not wrong. And all the scholars come from outside UK, mostly from US, to pursue their postgraduate degree. And approximately 2/3 of these scholarships are designated for PhD students. The remaining are for the MPhil candidates. So in the first round, there are 25 scholarships which are awarded to students from United States. The deadline for this round is somewhere around October. But for those who are willing to apply in this cycle, the deadline would be around December for their international students, and there are around 55 to 50 scholarships available. However, we should know that the scholarship is not for all the courses. It is for the postgraduate courses, but there are a few courses which are exempted from the scholarship, which would be later displayed in the slides. Can you please go to the next slide? Yeah, so what does the scholarship cover? So scholarship covers your university composition fees, which would be somewhere around 48 to 50,000 pounds for postgraduate study for PhD. And for MPhil, it would be around 35 to 40,000 pounds. It also gives you a maintenance allowance, which is around 21,000 pounds per annum. It covers your airfare at the start and the end of the course. Also your visa cost and immigration health surcharge. Apart from these core components, scholarship also covers these following discretionary components, like academic developing funding, which is around, if I'm not wrong, 2,000 pounds, a family allowance, a maternity or parenting funding, and hardship funding in case any unforeseen circumstances happen. Could you please go to the next slide? Yeah. So, what is the eligibility of the scholarship? Scholarship is for someone who is a non-UK citizen. Um, like I already said, someone who is planning to pursue a postgraduate degree, so a PhD or a Master's of Letters or a 1 year postgraduate course like an MPhil or MSc. So, however, like there are a few courses which are not included in the Gates scholarship, which you can see the list here. So, any undergraduate degree, MAST course, MBA, EMBA, M Finance, accounting, business doctorate, PGC. So, all some of these courses are not included. We should be noting that most of the part-time courses are not included. However, for PhD, part-time courses are included. Okay, can we go to the next slide, please? Yeah. So Gates has four selection criteria through which they filter out the candidates. Um, Before going to the selection criteria, I would just like to tell you that your applications are made to the department and then it's further approved by the department and is sent to the Gates selection committee. And the committee looks for four criteria. Uh, One is outstanding intellectual ability, the reason for choice of course, commitment to improving lives of others, and leadership potential. So I would be covering the initial two, and then I would be handing it to Faryal. Can you go to the next slide, please? Okay, the first criteria is your academic performance, outstanding intellectual abilities. So there are different ways through which you can show that. One way is through your marks card, the transcripts, the references. If your referees write about your intellectual ability, your analytical skills, that is a good way to prove your academic performance. If you have any publications, that is also something which is going to help you. But one thing to be noted is that publication is not a compulsory criteria to be applying for PhD or MPhil, but these are the criteria through which intellectual ability is measured. Um, Apart from this, the academic department only nominates the best candidates, the ones who have academically outstanding application to the selection committee. Um, and there are different ways to show that. So in the reference section, I'm not sure if you're aware of that. So when your referees are writing letters of reference, they're supposed to rank you in terms of your academic performance within the class, so top 5%, top 10%, and those criteria are counted. The selection process considers the candidate's potential to make a significant contribution to their field of study, as reflected in the research proposal, publications, and other scholarly activities. So your rationale why your study is important, that becomes really important. Can we go to the next slide, please? And the second criteria is reason for the choice of course. How well your research proposal fits in the discipline is something which is measured here. So candidates should be able to make a strong case for their chosen degree and how completing the course will facilitate their career plan. So why exactly they are planning to pursue this course? If it is a PhD, then why PhD? Why in that particular department or faculty? Why within that potential supervisor? And also like the trajectory of how they are planning to pursue their PhD. So research applicants are expected to make contact with their potential supervisor. That is the best way to do. It's not compulsion, but for few courses, you are required to provide a potential supervisor's name. So it's always better to talk to them beforehand before applying, and then sort of work it out through. Ask them what the funding opportunities and yeah, and like just ask them whether they are willing to supervise you. And candidates should articulate how the specific course aligns with their long-term goals and how it fits with the broader context of the academic and professional aspirants. A clear explanation of how the course will provide unique opportunities, resources, and networks at Cambridge that are crucial for candidates' future career or research objectives. So, for most of the part, Cambridge does not have a statement of purpose. So, you might have to fit all these information somewhere in your proposal or a few academic development questions that are asked, which would be really specific to these like these pointers. They would be asking, why would you want to do a course at Cambridge? And you would be required to write, say, around 50 to 100 words, if I'm not wrong. Applicants should demonstrate a thorough understanding of the course structure, including specific modules, research opportunities, or specializations, and explain how these aspects will directly contribute to the skill development. Um, okay, apart from these two criterias, there are the three criterias which Feryal would be discussing. Feryal, please.
Thanks, Ankit. Hi, I'm Feryal, and I will be going through the other two criterias with you all. I think a good way to look at these four criterias is that the first two are academic criterias, and the next two are like social impact criterias. That's how I read them. And personally, to some extent, I found academic criteria is easy to deal with because it's, do you have good grades? Are your recommenders writing that, you're a good and passionate student? And with respect to how the department fits you, you can always be like, this person and this person works in my field or allied fields. So that was easy for me personally. However, the commitment to improving lives of others and leadership I found slightly difficult because I felt like an imposter with my research. Will it improve life of other people? I think a good way to look at it is just that, like, if you have done some social work with some NGOs or organizations, that's always good. I'm of course talking about social science people. That's always good because that indicates that you have done some work on the ground, like your research is not an abstract research. You know the people, you have kind of an idea of the flesh and blood on the ground. So that's one way I looked at it. Like, my research deals with a very small group of people in South Asia, but it does look at their marginality and their rights. So therefore, I could convince the committee that my research project is committed to improving the life of other people. Then the fourth criteria, which is also kind of similar, is that leadership. Um, can we change the slide yeah. With leadership potential, you just need to demonstrate if you have been a leader in any way. Now, you might have experience of being a leader in the said NGOs, or you may have any formal or informal role of leadership that you might have done. That always helps. However, if, like me, you did not have any tangible leadership potential, the great thing about the last two criteria is that they are open to interpretation. They're not very tangible, so they are open to interpretation. So you can just be like, I'm doing research in this thing which nobody has done before. Nobody was brave enough or smart enough to find this gray area, so I'm a leader of thought. You can even do that. I think I did something like that because I did not have any, like, I led this project and I led this. I did not have that experience. So I think you can just be a leader in thought. That should be good enough. Excuse me. Yeah, you just have to show that you are able to take initiative and you can lead projects if you want. I think Nikita will talk about SOPs, but I'll just say that you just need to make sure that like you as a person and your research intersects with these four criteria when you're writing it. I'll go into timeline now. The applications opened 4th September of this year, so it's already been 1.5 months. I'm sure you must have had these discussions in your head by now on your own also. But usually there's two deadlines, one for US people and one for international students. However, I'm finding out that this year there are two deadlines for international students as well. So please go to your graduation applicant portal and see which deadline you have. Is it 3rd of December 2024, or is it with the rest of your PhD application on 7th January 2025? Please do check it out. So what happens after you have sent in the application is that the department will rank you. I think Ankit spoke about it a little bit. The department chooses very few number of people out of their huge pool of applicants to send to the Gates committee. Like, they fit all the four criteria. Please, like, interview them, see if they fit, if they deserve the scholarship, whatever. So that will happen from December to February. You will get an email from your department saying that, hi, you have been nominated for Gates-Cambridge Scholarship. Then the scholarship people will also email you at some point saying, when do you want the interview to happen? And the interviews happen in March, and you will be allowed to pick a date and time for that. Of course, like they have the options there, so you have to pick out of those options. Then the interview will happen. A few days before the interview, you will get to know your panelists. You will be sent that information so you can just check them out online. There will be somebody doing work related to your field. Like for me, there was an arts panel, and there was a professor from divinity department or art history, not English per se, but like just related departments. After the interview, you will be told soon, within a week, whether you have got the scholarship or not. In the timeline, we are told that it will happen by 7th of April 2025, not more than that. And then you will have to accept or reject the scholarship. You'll have 3 days to do that. Yeah, I will now leave Nikita to explain how to apply and write LORs.
Thanks, Feryal. All right, so talking about the process of applying, when you are filling your main application to Cambridge, sorry, through the university's graduate application portal, a component of that, a section of that will involve filling in the Gates-Cambridge section. What that entails is a couple of components. One is a Gates-Cambridge statement, which has to be 3,000 characters long, which is about 500 words, on your reasons for applying for this scholarship and how you fit with the 4 selection criteria that have been talked about so far. For PhD applicants, this will also involve a research proposal. For some programs, you are submitting a research proposal already as part of your main application, in which case they will ask you or specify in the application that you don't have to upload one separately. So it depends on the course that you're applying for, but do read the fine print. And finally, and a very important component, is the Gates-Cambridge reference, which is, in addition to the 2 academic references that your course is going to ask for, you will also need to designate or request somebody to be a Gates-Cambridge referee for you. And they have to submit a reference for you that sort of talks about your merits and your strengths and your fit with the 4 Gates-Cambridge criteria. So this has to be somebody that knows you quite well and that you've worked quite closely with. We'll talk more about that a little later. But Gates, the selection panel, does have access to the entirety of your application when they're reviewing it. So do make sure that the different pieces of your application all work together and work in harmony, and that what you're writing down in your Gates-Cambridge section, whether it's the statement or whether it's what your referee is putting into the reference that they write for you, should be in tandem and should work in harmony with what the different components, the other sections of your application have said. Could we move to the next slide, please? Thank you. So with the letter of reference, you should be asking somebody of appropriate standing. So make sure that you're thinking carefully about who this person is, what their professional background is, what their kind of standing is in their institution or wherever they work. They should be able to answer the question with authority, the question of how you are a good candidate for Gates-Cambridge and how you fit with the criteria. They should have a good understanding of the criteria and how competitive the Gates-Cambridge program is and how the academic standards at Cambridge are. So this is a conversation that you may have to have with your referee beforehand to ensure that they have all the necessary background information about the scholarship, about the criteria, and about what is expected. So all the details about the length of the reference as well, and what you would like for them to be writing or putting into it. Many applicants ask a current or former academic advisor who's aware of their personal attributes, so they need to know you really well. It could be a current or former employer or a senior member of an organization with whom they have volunteered. So this was what I had done. It was a director at a cooperative that I used to volunteer at, and somebody who was affiliated with the university as well. Although this is by no means an exhaustive list, so you do have quite a bit of leeway to figure out what kind of person you would like to ask. Some applicants do ask one of their two academic referees to write the Gates-Cambridge reference, and that's absolutely fine. So if there is that overlap, that's okay. The only really essential thing is that they have to have a very good understanding of your personal qualities, and they have to be writing about you in relation to the Gates criteria. And they shouldn't just be writing another academic reference for you, essentially. You should not be asking a friend or a family member or someone who's unable to comment on your suitability for a Gates-Cambridge scholarship. So this has to be someone who's worked with you in a capacity where they're able to comment on the different criteria. I should mention, so at least in my case, for instance, this was somebody I had worked with in every capacity except an academic capacity. So they weren't really able to comment directly on my academic suitability because they had never taught me. They weren't affiliated with my academic journey at all. But they were nice enough to just drop it in as a small sentence to say in relation to the rest of her contributions, I can understand why she has the grades she has, that sort of thing. So they don't have to have directly engaged with you in every sense. Like if you struggle to find somebody who fits all four of the criteria, do ensure or try and find ways to address those four criteria in other ways in the reference. Can we move to the next slide, please? Some points to consider. Again, the referee should be fully briefed about the scholarship, especially the selection criteria. The reason it's coming up so much, and I'm sort of mentioning it additionally, is because we really can't overstate this enough, how important it is that they have the right information so that they can write the most appropriate reference for you. It's useful when they use specific examples of how you meet the scholarships criteria. So one principle we talk about generally in applications is show rather than tell. So rather than saying that this candidate has great leadership capacity or potential, to tell a story or narrate an instance of when you actually demonstrated this. You'll need to ensure that your Gates-Cambridge referee understands the need to keep the reference focused on the Gates criteria and not, for example, rehash a standard or previous reference. So the selection panel at this point would have read through many, many references. And so a cut and dry kind of standard reference is something they would be able to spot quite instantly. And it really doesn't do you any favors if it's a generic sort of reference that isn't talking about your specific strengths or kind of the uniqueness of your story. So it's really essential to make sure that that's happening, that it's not a kind of generic statement and not copied from anywhere else. Sorry, Anisha, there was one more point on the previous slide. You must ensure that both your academic and Gates-Cambridge referees submit their reference by the specified deadline. This is absolutely essential because you may have submitted every other component of your application. But if your referees' references are not coming in by the deadline that's specified, then that means all of the other effort and work and time that you've put in is going to go to waste, because then that means your application cannot be considered as a complete application. So make sure that you're contacting people, reaching out with as much time to spare as possible, so that you're giving people time to construct the reference and submit it in time. This is a part of the application that you do not have entirely control over. You do have control over the parts where you are writing your own statements and your own pieces, and you're filling in your own form, but you do not have control over somebody else's time when they're writing a statement for you. So give yourself as much chance as possible. Maximize your odds by giving your referees as much time as possible to write their pieces. Okay, now we can move to the next slide, please. Thank you. In terms of the selection process, there will, as Feryal had mentioned in the table, there is a departmental nomination. So of all the applications that go in, a very small number of them are nominated and furthered on by the department that you're applying to say, yes, this person fits with the criteria, please interview them, exactly as Feryal said. Have I missed anything in this point? No. So about the interview, all candidates who are nominated by academic departments are then invited to a short interview to assess how they fit with the 4 Gates criteria. It's usually a 20 to 25-minute interview. It could be virtual or in person, depending on where you are in the world. And there are 4 subject-based interview panels. So there's one for the arts, for the biological sciences, physical sciences, and social sciences. So these are people who will be experts in their own field and will have knowledge of the field that you are applying to. And will sort of ask you questions based on that. And the interview is sort of the final stage, after which scholars will then be selected or told whether they have finally made it as a scholar-elect. Can we move to the next slide, please? Now, general tips. So at this point, all 3 of us panelists will be sharing with you some tips that we think applicants should really know, or things that we wish we had known a little bit more about. So I'll start off and then maybe hand it over. So first general tip would be something that I think, again, cannot overstate this enough, to please start this process as early as you can. And as you can is essential here. And to make sure that you are giving yourself, and again, giving other people around you who are helping you with the application, give as much time as possible to complete the different sections, because you have to write it, then you need time to edit it, you need time to send your application around to people for proofreading. You need time to identify your referees, you need time to contact your referees, they need time to write it and send it in. You need time in order to identify your supervisor, reach out to them in some subjects, again, depends on the subject, to work with them on refining your research proposal for them to finally agree to supervise you. So all of these things, including the final editing and the final proofreading that you yourself will do, also the submission process itself takes time. So navigating that portal, of logging in, making sure that everything is in place, making sure all your files are uploaded in the right format, submitting it well within the deadline, all of those things take time. And so do give yourself enough time to do all of these things. I'm going to stop saying it. I've probably said it 50 times at this point, but that's just because I think it's really important. And the second point, very quickly, would be to think about your narrative. So think about in your application the story that you want to tell about yourself, about your own life, about your motivations, about why you are applying to Cambridge, to this course, why you want to study this particular topic that you want to study. Again, this depends on the course that you're doing. But rather than trying to think of all of the information that you possibly can, and going for quantity, prioritize quality. So really pick and choose what are the most important and unique aspects of your journey and your story that you would like to tell. And that really show the uniqueness of your experience, how you have navigated the world and how it's brought you to the worldview that it has. And all of this, of course, goes without saying in the context of the Gates criteria and of what the application question is actually asking. But think about what makes you you and what makes your journey special. And that is something that the selection panel really wants to know. They want to know who you are and what it is that you would then bring with your wealth of experience and the richness of what you've seen and done. So do have a think about that and go for quality over quantity would be my 2 tips. So just going by the order of people I can see on the screen, I will hand it over to Feryal for your tips.
Hi, everybody again. I just wanted to, I think personally, I thought the SOP was the most important thing of the Gates application. Might not be true, but Nikita already spoke on LOR pretty exhaustively. So I feel like um, I'll just um, say how approach the SOP, and maybe that will be helpful to some people. Like I already said that um, I made like my biography and my research intersect with the four criterias. And what you do when you're applying is that you Google SOPs, Gates, Cambridge, and that's, a part of the process. And you see what other people have written, how they have presented their story. And but what tends to happen is that if you come across an SOP that's extremely good, you try to emulate it, which is, what I did. And I ended up with a very bad SOP. And it's very hard to not emulate that. Like I remember there was some person in PhD physics and they had like written an extremely well written SOP. Not only was I emulating it, but also I felt so discouraged about my own story. So do read your SOPs on the Google Chrome, whatever. But when you're starting to write, put it out of your mind. And what worked for me is make a worksman-like draft of how you're fitting the criteria, you and your research. Like it doesn't have to be anything. Like I literally was like tick, tick, tick as my SOP was hitting the academic, the department, the leadership, and once that is, you have written that down, you can make it then more creative, more wacky, more specific to yourself. But I think try to make a worksman like draft first in how you are fitting the criteria and how your research is fitting the criteria, and then go ahead and try to write it more creatively and do put the other SOPs out of your brain. And the second thing that I was telling Nikita and Ankit yesterday is that we do, like in all the Gates sessions I have seen, people say start early, and that's because it's really good advice. You should start early. There's a lot to do. There's many moving parts, but sometimes something happens. Life happens. You're unable to, prepare or plan. Um, if by some chance you're not able to start as early as you would have liked, but still think that your research fits with Gates, like you are academically good, your research has social impact, just go ahead and fill the application anyway. You should start before, you should talk to a proposal, but I personally started kind of late and I was not able to talk to a professor before. So just go with your gut also. That's what I would say. Yes, start early, do all of that. But if you're unable to, for some reason, health reason, any other personal reason, but you have a gut feeling that your research fits well, this is not just for Gates, this is anything else, do go ahead and fill in that application. That's it. Okay.
These are pretty amazing tips already. I would say, yeah, I would also echo on the same feeling. Start early, reach out to your potential supervisor as soon as possible. Tell them about your project idea. Also ask them if there are fundings available. Ask them about whether I mean, if you believe that you qualify for Gates, ask them whether they believe that you do. And like try to arrange some initial meetings, because those meetings are important, because it's the supervisor and the committee who will be sending the application to the selection committee of Gates. So and there is a lot of ambiguity involved in the process. You do not know whether your application would be sent to the Gates selection committee, so you have to make sure that your supervisor is right there, like trying to push you through this process. Make sure that you have all the adequate information written in your CV, because that is a really important criteria. That's the first sort of like filter that they apply through the academic department. Also try to try to build a strong narrative, like Nikita was saying. And in your research proposal, do emphasize on your rationale, because it's the same proposal which is going to go to the Gates committee, and they would be selecting it on the basis of rationale as well, because academic criterias will anyways be reflected through your mark sheet, through your publications, conferences, and things like that. Make sure that you are constantly in touch with your supervisor. Try to arrange few meetings. I think I just got lucky with my supervisor. She was really, really helpful in the initial stage. When and then she later went on leave, which is completely okay. But then do try to communicate, talk to them, talk to previous scholars. I would suggest that. And the process is actually, I mean, you have to be a bit analytical about the process. So every year, and there's so many departments, right? So in some cohort, you would find 2 or 3 people from the same department. In the next cohort, you might not find someone from that department. So I would just suggest that be a bit analytical in the terms. Do not, like irrespective of whatever the result is, do not sort of like put it all on yourself. Um, there might be times that, like for example, I believe in last year history cohort there were 2 PhDs, one or two MPhils, but this year they have like 1 PhD and 1 MPhil, if I'm not wrong. So that is something which is just happens actually. So do be mindful of that. And yes, it is a lot stressed. I mean, it is a stressful process, but try to keep as much like things as much as in control as you can. Talk to your referees. Do let them know what exactly they have to write. Do tell them about the selection criteria. Do tell them about your journey. um, Meet them often, like just before that they have submitted the letter. Just try to meet them, try to speak to them, and emphasize on like what exactly they have to talk about. Nikita has spoken well enough about this, so I do not have to repeat it all. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. If you have any questions, please let us know.
Hi, I'll stop sharing now so that we can open the floor to questions. Maybe I'll just add a very small point before we hand it over to the panelists for questions. In terms of tips, I think all of you talked about the Gates essay and how to tell a story and things like that. But I also know that it might be difficult to articulate your story when you're starting off. So if you want to just, know about how people might talk about their profiles and stories, Gates, in addition to the publicly available SOPs, Gates also does a lot of student or scholar profiles. If you just go to the Gates-Cambridge website and look at some of these profiles, you would just have an idea of how other people have written their stories in the past. So again, that's just for you to draw inspiration on. Don't think too much about it. Like Feryal said, like don't get lost in that maze of stories. But again, just something that might help you, like basically write the first 2 lines, probably. Okay, we see a lot of hands, and there are lots of questions in the chat as well. Maybe can we start with Tanvi Kulkarni, if that's okay? Tanvi, would you like to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Nikita and Kid, Priyal, for this amazing session. I'm applying for the MPhil in Arts Creative Education at Cambridge. And I've heard, obviously, how most scholarships are reserved for PhD students. So that's a little hesitation. I think I'm entering the application with. But I have my application to the course ready, and it's halfway through as well. But I think with the scholarship application, I think I wanted to ask, when you receive feedback from so many people, it sort of messes with like your story and like where you're coming from. And I think what I'm struggling with is like with my essay to Cambridge, I had a couple of people give feedback to it, and I think with like over 10 people sort of letting me know what can go into it. I feel like it's sort of doesn't have my voice in it as much as it did in the beginning. And so I think I'm a little concerned in terms of, even with the scholarship essay. I wanted to ask where you would recommend to like draw a line and stick to your voice and feel like this is who I am, but also incorporate advice from other people, because I feel like I tend to underestimate myself in terms of when I listen to others give feedback. And so that becomes like central to how I tell my story as opposed to how I might want to tell it, if that makes sense.
Should I answer that?
Oh, yeah.
Sure, you can go ahead and start with that if there's anything.
I think like it's you should take feedback from as many people as you have, but you don't have to apply everybody's feedback to your SOP. You should see what works for you and what doesn't. So a thing that I did is that I did ask, I didn't have that many people, but yeah, whoever could give feedback, I did send it to them. But sometimes I was like, yes, they might be right in their own point of view, but I don't think that works for me particularly. So do be aware of what works for you and what doesn't. Even when I give suggestions to people, if they send me a proposal or a SOP, I tell them, look, this is my suggestions, but if any of these don't work for you, don't take them. So that's one thing. And the second thing that you were talking about, there are a lot of MPhil students in Gates, our cohort. I feel like maybe the division is 2:1, and like 2:1 among 75 people is still a huge number. But so you should definitely apply. Don't let that discourage you from not applying. I'll just.
Ankit, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, so
to
I
that?
just want to say that like one good way to write an essay or like answer these questions is just to avoid a lot of repetitions. So you might get a lot of feedbacks from people, and like Feryal said, you don't have to compulsorily accept all of those. Just accept the ones which work for you, but just make sure like while you are answering these questions, you are not repeating a lot of things from your CV, because the committee already has like a lot of information from your CV. They would be really looking for the narrative for your journey. And yeah, I think Nikita also mentioned about it. Just do not try to like throw in words like you are resilient or you're hardworking. Just try to connect it in the form of a story. You are just try to give some anecdotes, some narratives, and yeah, it should just like broadly signal out what like who you are rather than you outrightly saying that this is who I am. So yes, just basically
Only
take that framework in your mind and then like take that feedback. Yeah, sorry Nikita.
no, just totally agree with all of that. The only thing I would add is acknowledging that it is a very difficult thing to do because it's subjective in terms of how much of my voice is enough, and how do you know when it should have more of your voice in it or less of your voice. But yes, it is ultimately something that only you can judge. But one thing, if I understood correctly, it sounds like you're sending it around to a lot of people and you're getting feedback from a lot of people. So maybe one useful thing could be to see in the feedback that you're getting, are there any common threads? So is it that out of the 7, 8 people you've sent it to, 5 of them are suggesting the same change or suggesting the same kind of restructuring or reordering? In which case, you can take that as a decent indicator that yes, there may be something there that might need alteration, because quite a few people are noticing the same thing. So this is obviously not a hard and fast rule, but that could be one thing that could help you decide whether or not you want to accept a certain kind of change. Like, is there a common thread or a common theme to the kind of things that people are suggesting to your piece? But ultimately, it has to be you have to be happy with what you sent in and you have to feel good about it. So whatever it takes for you to feel as though you've done justice to yourself and to your own narrative and said everything about yourself that you want to say, while also, of course, taking care of like, if there are things that you find valuable in other people's feedback. I'll probably stop there.
That's very
Thank you so
helpful.
much.
Thank you.
Great. I hope that answers your question, Tanvi. I'm going to get to a question from the chat. So Sabahat asks that he's interested in applying to MRes at Cambridge in civil engineering. and they've shared their profile with how they've graduated at AMU, which is ranked 8th in India, and they've had fairly good grades. They have papers published in multiple journals, internship from IITs and things like that. But they've been unable to find a supervisor. And the question is around whether you can give or share tips on how to find a supervisor when professors are not replying, or the responses have not been so positive generally, like in terms of accepting students.
Okay, so I believe that one way to locate a supervisor is just to go to the academic department, the faculty department website, and just see who are the people who are working on the project of your interest and write a mail to them. If they are not replying, it's actually kind of tricky, but then like I would suggest to take a follow-up maybe like in say 10 or 12 days, a very humble follow-up. And yeah, and like if there's something that you specifically want to work on, and if you're not able to find a supervisor in that department, I would just suggest you to maybe start looking at some different university. um, so sorry, that's what I believe.
I would agree, I think, with especially the idea of not necessarily putting all your eggs in one basket. I know this is a session about Gates-Cambridge, but even from some sort of feedback from previous mentees, they do say that when they hear back sometimes, or when, generally people who apply and when it doesn't work out, what they say is that the feedback they get is often about good fit. They say, yes, your idea is fantastic and your work sounds fantastic, your background is fantastic, but it just doesn't seem like the right fit for our department. It might just be that this is not something that people are currently working on as a research focus. So in which case, it is absolutely okay to diversify and try and see if there is really a person at a different university whose work excites you and is something that you see yourself learning from and would like to learn from. So that's one thing to potentially do, is to branch out a little bit. But other than that, a lot of professors have office hours at least once a week, which will be a small window of time, an hour or 2 hours in the week, when they say, okay, my door is open, I'll be in my office. If anybody needs me, come meet me. So that could be a good opportunity in case you've not been getting a response over email. You could try and find out if the professors that you're looking to contact do have office hours at some point. Try and find out and see if you can just go have a conversation and meet them and see. That could be one thing. Another is if you're able to try and find office hours for a different person who's not necessarily a supervisor, but somewhere close in terms of research area. If you can have a conversation with a related professor just to see if you can get a pair of eyes on your proposal and see what you might be missing. Like, is there a reason that, like, it may be fantastic as a piece of work that you've put in, or your research proposal may have a lot of potential, but is there something that you might be missing, just something small that may need to be tweaked in order for it to start getting a better response? So see if you can get in touch with other professors at the department who might be working on something related, and might be able to help you with that feedback.
Thank you so much, both. There's been, I think, multiple questions on the interviews. So maybe Ankit and Feryal, if you would like to talk through what your interview experience was, I think that would help or benefit a few candidates. Yeah.
Should I go ahead? Okay.
Oh yes.
Yeah, okay. So I'll just narrate what the experience was like from start to finish. I think I did find the interview a bit intense, and by that I don't mean that it was unfriendly at all or intimidating, but all I mean is that in the PhD English or South Asian Studies interviews, they let you talk a lot, while as in the Gates interview, people would just be like, could you please hurry up and stuff like that. When I started the interview, I think I was asked, tell us your research project in one sentence, which is a very hard thing, as all of us will know. We tend to talk about in paragraphs at least. But I think I managed to sum it up in 3 sentences, and they were like, oh, okay, that's interesting, but also that was not one sentence. So I was like, okay. So I think it was divided in 2 parts for me. It was 30 minutes long. For the first part, they did talk about my proposal, the tenability of my research. They had gone through it, and they were like, what text are you doing? Why do you think these texts represent your area the best? And stuff like that. Like, it was extensive. Even though they were not from English department, they had read my proposal and were asking. And the second part, I would say, had to do with the criteria. Yet again, how do you fit the criteria? Why do you think Cambridge English is best for you? What social impact will you have? Will your research have? So that's what I would say, that for me, it was divided in 2 parts. One to do with my research proposal, which I had turned in, and other to do with the criteria of Gates-Cambridge. And they do tend to like hurry you a little bit or stuff like that. It's not unfriendly. They're very polite and friendly, but it's a bit intense. Yeah, that was my experience. Maybe Ankit can have some other insight.
No, it was the same experience for me as well, because I think we were on the same committee, we got the same panel. Yeah, so but it was a bit challenging for me because my topic involved a lot of social science concepts, and like I'm also someone who is coming from an interdisciplinary background. Like, I did my bachelor's in economics, then master's in development studies, and then doing a PhD in history. So a lot of questions on why history, a lot of questions on like how, like, why history to study an automobile sector. Like, you could have studied it in sociology, you could have studied it in anthropology, and like I had to defend that a lot. It was really intimidating. But they do try to listen to you, they try to calm you down. There was a lot of specific questions on history, like just related to yours, like just related to my subject matter. So they were asking a lot of questions on welfare state, about Britain as well, like when beverage system, and a lot of Indian context as well, Indian automobile sector. They were also asking a lot of questions on the selection criteria. They did ask me about my advocacy work, leadership skills. So I was someone who was working with the ministry before this. So they asked me like how I did the advocacy, and why do I really want to pursue a PhD? What after PhD? So it's usually not very rigid, I would say. They do not follow a specific structure, and it depends on the panel. But yes, you would definitely expect questions on your proposal, around your proposal, as well as on the selection criteria, and your academic preparation. So yeah.
Thank you both. Tanvi Kurchar, would you like to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yeah, sure. Thanks a lot. Firstly, thanks a lot for all of y'all for the really nice presentation. So my primary question concerns joint supervision. So since all of you all are also from a rather interdisciplinary background, I was sort of wondering about what in what capacity it's possible to submit an interdisciplinary research proposal or a PhD proposal specifically, and whether the scholarship inherently allows, for example, 2 or 3 supervisors that you can enlist or shortlist in your application.
Okay. So it's a bit contradictory actually. It depends on the faculty about your research proposal. So if you are working on an interdisciplinary subject, for example, if I'm working on automobile sector, and there's this person called Professor Andrew Sanchez in anthropology department who has been working on labor process and automobile, which is very close to my topic. And if I really want to work with them, uh, it largely depends on the faculty of history where I'm enrolled in, um, to sort of like have them as an advisor. So there are 3 people who are going to be there in your in your entire PhD journey. There is a supervisor, there is an advisor, and then there is an external advisor, which is again from the department for in case of history. It's something which is really, really department centric, faculty centric, and contradictory because Gates, I think, would like for you to have an interdisciplinary project, and would really want you to showcase how your project is well suited for the university. So it would be better if you write about professors from different departments and you would like to interact with them. And yeah, but I am not quite sure whether you would be able to have a secondary supervisor or advisor. I know a lot of people do have it in different departments, but yeah, I'm not sure about history or sociology.
Okay, thanks. So what I understand is that it's best to lead with, or it's best to sort of maybe mention sort of like a congregation of different professors, but perhaps not to very strongly say that you're considering these specific professors to be co-supervisors. That's probably something that can be figured out much later in your application.
I would suggest the best thing to do would be to find a supervisor from your faculty who is the closest related to your discipline, like closest related to your topic. Write that name right now, and maybe later explore the idea of, like venturing out.
Um, Let
Okay.
me just say that I do agree with Ankit. I feel like if you're filling in for Gates or your English, whatever department you have, for the application, in my opinion, just choose supervisors in your department. That is what I'm also like I would do. And later, once you're done with that, if you're here, you can always ask your supervisors, I can have as an advisor? Can it be from my
Mhm.
department or a different department? I'm having these conversations with my supervisor, and I don't think there's a hard no, because my research is also pretty interdisciplinary, and I would really like to have somebody from history or political science also looking over what I'm doing. So she has not said no. However, since there's like why this department is good for you, I would just be like, pick supervisors from your department for the application at least. That would be my advice as well, like Ankit was saying.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Only tiny thing to add would be, at least while applying, I remember there is only scope to name one supervisor. I can't remember if there is, like, I don't think you have a separate tab where you can add multiple names
Hmm.
for people to supervise you.
I
How is
could
it for you
add
guys?
2 or 3 actually. I wrote 3 names, I think.
There is one section, but you can like just add multiple.
Right, you can name multiple people. But
But
yeah, I would, sorry.
I did not name multiple people. I just named one.
Yeah, I would totally agree with you both on that actually, because you don't want it to come across as though you're not sure and therefore you're naming multiple people, or that you haven't contacted and like that you don't have an agreement with one person and therefore you're naming multiple people. You don't want it to come across that way necessarily. Not that it would, and it's not necessary that people haven't done this, but I think in our experience, we tend to err on the side of just name one person who's the best fit that you can think of in your department.
Okay, yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, everyone. We are running a bit over time. There are still loads of questions. Are you okay to stay an additional 10 minutes? If not, okay, great. Thank you so much. There's again been multiple questions around contacting referees, and if you would like to share any quick tips. I know you did talk about this quite exhaustively during the presentation, but there's still some outstanding questions around how to contact referees, what your tips were, or I don't think you need to discuss who they were, but yeah, what your approach was in basically getting in touch with your referees.
So just like an experience, what happened is this time I was applying to multiple colleges, and I had only 3 referees, and I was applying to close to 15 colleges, a lot in US and Oxbridge. So what what I did is I maintained an Excel sheet with all the colleges with the deadline and when I want them to submit it, because I'm also someone who would like tend to lose myself in this process. Um, and I would like constantly chase them. Like I would constantly go and meet them just to say hi. But rather telling them, like this is where I'm applying, and constantly talk to them about the department and the project that I want to work on. And yeah, so I am also someone who is coming from an interdisciplinary background, and I applied to history, I applied to sociology as well. In some places, I applied to anthropology as well. So I had to really make sure that my like supervisors do not, my referees do not sort of like make a mistake in writing about the course name or like university's name. So there's always a set of panic because you can't see the reference letter. So it's best to like constantly go and keep in touch with them, keep talking to them. um it's a bit fair to give like like at least a month prior notice of like when they're submitting their references, so they have, so that they have time to um write specific reference for you. Generic references do not help. Usually what happens is professors have a set of generic things, and then they would like replace that with your name and then maybe add one or two specific things about you. Things like that also would not help, because you would really want them to write specific to your like like to your project. About the Gates reference, you need to be really really careful. If you have done some advocacy work, if you have done some leadership work, if you have done some NSS, or maybe if you were an SFC, or like you have taken any leadership position, just make sure that your like the one who is writing the reference knows about it. It's better to give them like a, sort of like your CV or SOP before asking them to write your letter of reference. That sort of like helps them to keep aligned, but make sure that like while you are giving your CV, you are not giving, I mean like uh, all three referees are not specifically focusing on the same point. You would want them to write about different skills. So somebody might be focusing on your academic skills, somebody might be focusing on how resilient you are, like in throughout the PhD journey, how you would be a great asset to the institution. Somebody is writing about your commitment to work. So you need to like make sure that the specific referees are talking about your specific skills. Yeah, that's pretty all.
I agree with Ankit. I just wanted to say that sometimes if you're asking somebody to write your recommendation letter and they have agreed, you can send them the CV and everything, and then you can send them in an email. I would like you to highlight these qualities. If it's okay with you. Like, I have done this work. It would be great if you could talk about that in the LOR. And to the second professor, you could also be like, this is my CV, this is whatever, but I would like you to highlight this, so that like you ensure that different dimensions of your work are getting highlighted in your different references. You don't want everybody to write the same thing. That's not helpful. And yes, ask them 1 month at least before. For my Gates reference, because it's a little bit different, I went to the person's office because I lived in the same city, and we discussed how to approach it, like what all we can write. And if you're not in the same city, you can ask them for a Zoom call or a call if they're free. Just discuss with them how to approach the letter, so that you're also orally telling them, like, these are the criterias, this is what I want you to say, how can we go about it. That's all. I just wanted.
Just want to address, there was a quick question in the chat about whether there's a word limit for referees. As far as I know, I don't think that we are given as applicants, we aren't told that there is that there's a limit in terms of how long the reference needs to be, but because there's an automated kind of prompt that goes out to the referees to say you have been requested to write a reference, I think whatever instructions are appropriate to them, like whether there is a word limit or what they need to address, I think that will all go as separate information directly as part of that prompt. I think they will be informed through that portal what it is that they need to do, as far as I can tell. Other than that, about referees, nothing else to add really, just except think don't necessarily limit yourself thinking that somebody is not directly in the academic space and therefore can't be a good referee. Like, think open-mindedly about who you want to ask. Just make sure that it's somebody that has a kind of standing of their own. Though again, this would really depend. I'm talking just from experience here. Not, of course, not giving names, but the person who was nice enough to write mine, he wrote it twice for me because I'd applied twice for Gates and got it the second time. And he was happy to be my Gates referee both times. The way that he wrote the reference was very different in both years. So that makes me wonder actually if that was kind of one of the things that tipped it over the edge. But this was somebody who was not associated academically with me at all. But he was associated with the university that I was studying at. And he wasn't in my department. I was in social policy. He was in sustainability, like sustainable development. He wasn't an academic at all. He was somebody sort of working on strategy in the sustainability department. And so through the university, I had no connection with him, but we just happened to be colleagues at a different project. And we worked together for 3 years on that project. And so when he wrote the reference, he was referring to our association through the project and how we work together as colleagues. But what he was leveraging and mentioning was his standing at the university. And he said, I've been working for these many years at the university in this department. Here's what I have done. And then pivoted totally to talk about our work together in a completely different space. So that may not seem like the kind of natural choice for somebody to ask to be a Gates referee, but just to say there's no kind of hard and fast or cookie cutter kind of description of what a Gates referee can look like. So it's okay to think broadly about it.
Thank you again. Mohammed, would you like to unmute yourself and ask your question? And then we'll probably be able to take one other question from the chat before we close.
Thank you
Yeah.
so much for giving me time, and thank you all for having this wonderful session. I think my question just being answered by I forgot the name, just Nikita. So the similar thing, I have a very good relationship with the supervisor at the Cambridge. Last year I got a short-term fellowship at the Cambridge. I spent good time with the supervisor for past. I'm actually working on a project which is based on South Asia. So everything is sorted. I have a good job, academic job in Pakistan. But unfortunately, what I'm struggling to apply for any scholarship, prestigious scholarships, whether it's in UK or US, it comes to the end at the referees. Who should I choose as an academic referee? So I graduated from a top university, government top university in Pakistan. But in my department, I don't feel anyone because I have experience. They have done my they presented reference for my Fulbright scholarship, and unfortunately they didn't some forgot the deadline, and they're not so like I will not put them as a referee for any prestigious scholarship just to end. So I have a very good professional referees. My personal referee is really good, but how to bypass this, roadblock of having one academic supervisor, because yeah. And the second thing is the SOPs. Um, as all of you mentioned, when you start writing your SOPs and you talk about how to put your story, I'm an albino working an archaeologist working in the field. So I have this whole story of like resilience, hard work, moving different cities, having experience of highlands, midlands, deserts, and everything. But putting like right now, what I'm lacking is mentoring. So is there any way to get someone who could just vet my, application?
Yeah, about the reference bit, you can definitely put a reference based on your professional engagement. Or referee can be a professional, um, like having a professional engagement with you. But since there is a compulsory criteria of having an academic reference, what I would suggest is, if you believe that your public university back in Pakistan is not, and none of the faculty members are suitable enough to write credible about you, then maybe these short-term trips that you took to, say, Cambridge, or through Fulbright, maybe try to find someone over there who have worked with you. It might not be the, I do not know actually, it might not be the most strongest because the engagement would be short, but yeah, and if you are, like planning to take a risk, maybe contact back to your like undergraduate teachers, and this time like really chase them, like really go behind them, and like if you feel that they're not going to submit it on time, you have to like go to their office and ask them like what's the status, what did you do, because it might, I mean, like it might come across rude, but you have to get it done because it's your reference. And about your SOP, I would just suggest you to read like some of the SOPs, because a lot of people who are coming to school are not directly coming from school. They have been like in working in the industry and things like that. So the way they craft their SOP is a bit different from someone who has been like constantly in this process of education. So maybe like read samples on how they have like mapped out their experiences, how they have charted it out, and then like just do not like Feryal was saying, do not just like take that as a specimen and then start like patching your experiences in that, because that is not going to help you. You rather would want to create something which is of your own, which would show your trajectory. And yeah, I would just suggest like reading a lot of SOPs do help. So I used to, something that really helped me was just there's this specimen of Harvard SOPs. They have like 6 or 7 SOPs, all put online, from Department of Political Science. Do check it out, it's very easily available. Just write Harvard SOP guidelines, and yeah, just see that how they have like structured it out, and maybe just think along the same lines. You do not have to follow it, but then just do it like how you would like to narrate your story. Yeah.
I just quickly want to add that I was also dealing with like tardy professors. Like they were very good professors, but they were not good at deadlines. So one thing that I would do, make a fictitious deadline 10 or 15 days before, 10 days before. I would be like, if the deadline was 1st January, I would be like, it's 20 December. And then from 20 December, I would hound them in the sense that it's already the deadline and you have to do it now. That helped me. Maybe you could do that. I just like created a fake deadline, which was well in advance of the real deadline to just avoid any tardiness. So that's one thing that I would say to you. And about writing, I think like you can email, if you're writing a Gates sample, I'm sure you can email any one of us and we would be very happy to give you the feedback on top of whatever you're finding on the internet, of course.
So just a couple of things. This this thing about the fictitious deadline is interesting. It sounds like I would absolutely do something like this as well. But just to mention, do be careful that if somebody agrees to be your referee, in the prompt that they get, the automated email that they get from the university to request the reference, that should mention a different date. So just to bear in mind, be a little bit careful about what you're saying, I guess, and how it kind of comes across. But it does sound like it would be necessary in some cases. But couldn't agree with Ankit more on, don't be afraid to hound your professors and your referees. And it's absolutely okay to say that there's a lot at stake here for me. And that, they'll only consider the application if the reference goes in by this date. So do make sure that they know how important it is that they do respect that deadline, is one thing. But just also to add to what Feryal was saying about emailing us, there is also, like, we get a lot of messages also on LinkedIn sometimes, just from people who like will cold message you or like cold email or reach out, not knowing you at all. You don't have to know somebody to identify, okay, here's a person who's got the scholarship that I am applying for, or is at the university that I'm applying for, or is on the course that I'm applying for, and would be somebody good to reach out to. And so feel free to reach out to them or try and get their contact, email them out of the blue, and just say, here's my application. Do you think you'd have the time to take a look? At worst, they will not reply, but at best, you'll get a bit of support. So it's totally okay to cold email in that sense if it's mentoring and support that you're looking for. But EduAccess also runs, and Anvesha might be able to talk more about this. But I think EduAccess also does have a component a little later on in the year where we kind of review statements like Gates-Cambridge statements, or I think there is a kind of space for mentors to be reviewing applications or application material. Tell me if I'm wrong, but I think we have done something like this in past years. So that would also be a good resource to kind of make use of. And generally, feel free to reach out to us. Feel free to reach out to mentors generally to ask if they might have the time to take a look.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. I will talk about EduAccess at the far end of the session, but maybe, Feryal, there was a question more for you, which someone asked that if MPhil in English literature would be considered for Gates. I'm not sure if you would be able to speak to that. And the second part of the question was if someone doesn't have research experience, is that okay, or is it advisable to have more research experience before application?
I think like as MPhils, you can get forwarded for Gates, of course. However, I will say that I know more PhD English people who have gotten Gates than MPhil. So my suggestion to you would be just write to the department and be like, I'm an MPhil. Like Ankit was saying, what is my likelihood of getting Gates? Don't be shy to do that. And they will be able to guide you. But apart from Gates, there's also a few other fellowships like Shivning or Commonwealth that you should also apply to alongside Gates, which is, good for MPhil. I meet a lot of MPhils who have that fellowship. With research experience, I feel like if you have attended a conference, like when I was in my undergraduate college, our department would hold a conference. And if you have attended it, presented any paper, you can add that also. It doesn't have to be a published thing or an international conference. Like whatever you have done in your capacity is fine. If you have not done it, that's also okay. I think it's not mandatory for an MPhil to have research experience, but if you have gone to some kind of conference, even attended, I would just add that. Also, if you have some publication which is not academic, which is like essay type on culture, on any magazine, printed or digital, I would add that too. Just to give a sense of you're a curious person, you have written about this. Doesn't need to be academic always, could be in any other magazine. So, but about Gates, I would say reach out to the department. In principle, you should be able to get it, but I do know more PhDs who have it. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone. I think we are inching towards closing the session today. If we haven't gotten to your question, I would strongly encourage you to look at Project EduAccess's website and the YouTube channel. We do keep posting a lot of resources on application documents and things like that there. I am mindful that there are a couple of questions around how to write to supervisors. And if you have any further doubts on referees, application documents, just the SOPs and things like that, a lot of these materials are covered in Project EduAccess's website. I've just posted a few relevant links for you to have a look at later. We will like Nikita mentioned, have a more dedicated, say, Gates-Cambridge Scholarship application support for our mentees. So for the mentees in this call, you will have an opportunity to reach out to us and get your application documents reviewed by us in due course. But otherwise, yes, please check out our YouTube channel. Please check out the resources on the website. And if you have any questions about this session, any question about other applications that you might be interested in, you can always reach out to the programs team and we'll be happy to get back to you. Thank you so much to all our panelists again. Thank you for staying with us almost 25 minutes over the actual call. But yeah, I wish all the applicants all the best and hopefully see some of you in other EduAccess sessions to come. But okay, I'm going to close the call now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.